Alright guys, today we're talking about PlayStation exclusives or exclusive games in general because there seems to be this conversation going around that exclusives are now anti-consumer or they're just not really as important to gaming as they once were, and it's not the future of gaming. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. We're also talking about the PlayStation 5 and the next generation Xbox and frame rates versus visual fidelity and what we can expect, because it seems that we are being told, or at least we should believe, that the next generation Xbox is going to be able to achieve the same graphical fidelity that PlayStation 5 games are running at 30 frames per second, except on the Xbox Series X, they will run at 60 frames per second and look that good. So yeah, definitely need to take a little bit of time to talk about that. So yeah, I'm gonna let you guys know right off the bat, this video may get a little bit ranty, but it's been quite some time since I've done a video like this, so figured, hey, why not? Let's just do it. And I know that a lot of you are probably waiting to see if Sony's going to be announcing anything about PlayStation 5 pre-orders or the price or the release date, and at the time of this recording, we still haven't heard anything. There's been a rumor that's been gaining some traction for a little while now, claiming that today was going to be the day, and as of right now, nothing has happened, and as each hour goes by, I'm thinking it's less and less likely to actually happen. It still might, you know, we still have some time left in the day, but I don't know. If not, we'll just have to wait for whenever Sony's ready to talk about it. So anyway, let's talk about exclusive games. Now, obviously, I think most of you are well aware of Phil Spencer's recent comments, and apparently how individuals like me and others are completely twisting his words and whatnot. And I didn't emphasize that he was talking about generational exclusives, even though, you know, we've known this for quite some time now. Come on, we've known that Phil Spencer and Team Xbox and the direction they're going, and exclusives haven't really been important to them for years now. I mean, sometime back in like, you know, 2016 or something like that, they decided that they're gonna put all their games on PC and it's not so much about selling the console anymore. Look, I just want to set the record straight here. You guys know how I feel. You guys know that I think exclusive games are important. I think exclusive games are critical to moving hardware. And as a hardware enthusiast, yes, I care about that. I do care that, hey, I want to see this console, this piece of hardware that I'm enthusiastic about, sell as well as it can and do as well as it can. And also as a consumer, from a consumer standpoint, as somebody who's going to buy a new console to spend $400 or $500 or more on a new console, I want to feel like it's worth the purchase. And exclusive games, in my opinion, do a great job in both of those areas. Exclusive games obviously move hardware, and exclusive games give this hardware a real sense of value, in my opinion. Okay, and especially when you look at the quality of the exclusive games we're talking about here, all you have to do is take one good look at the way Sony has handled their exclusive games this generation. You could even look at Nintendo. You could even look at the way Microsoft handled their games in the past, right? And you realize that there just seems to be this inherent connection between exclusive content to a console or platform and quality, okay? And I've always told you guys that I believe the reason for this is because these companies and these developers and these publishers who are pushing expensive hardware, they are well aware that in order to sell people on expensive hardware, you need to show them something that's impressive, not something that's mediocre, not something that's average or, you know, especially below average. You need to show them something that's really going to make them go, wow, I need to play this and I need to go buy this console right now. Okay, in my opinion, there's absolutely nothing anti-consumer about that. If anything, I would argue that exclusive games are pro-consumer for the consumer who wants to go out there and support the hardware and buy it. It's giving them, as I said, true value. Now, does a game come off as less valuable if it's playable on other platforms? Not necessarily, but you could argue that the console you're buying, if that same game is available on lesser platforms or cheaper platforms or alternative platforms, you could argue that, yeah, that does devalue the console. So look, there's people out here who are trying to claim that Phil Spencer and his comments, you know, people just can't accept that this is the future of gaming. And it reminds me of the whole cloud situation, okay? Can we talk a little bit about Google Stadia? Does anybody remember those conversations? How The people who were enthusiastic and 100% behind Google Stadia, they were out here fighting tooth and nail, claiming that this is the future, and anybody who denies it, they're going to be left in the past. They're going to be stuck in the mud. And how'd that work out, right? Google Stadia was walking in here like they're going to be the next big thing, and everybody, at least some people, were acting like it was going to be the next big thing. But people like me and you most likely were sent back like, yeah, no, that's not what we want. That's not what we want. That's not to say it can't exist or it can't carve out a little section of its own, because of course it can. But that's look, we're not there yet. And if we're ever going to be there where the future is all cloud gaming, or 99% of gamers are playing their games through the cloud, that's way out there. We don't even have to think about that right now. And so I'm not saying that Xbox is on that same level, but what I'm trying to say is that at some point last generation, Phil Spencer and Team Xbox, they just decided that they are not going to compete with Sony and Nintendo in the traditional way anymore. And they're going to do their own thing, and they're going to come up with their own rules, I guess you could say, right? And come up with their own metrics of success. Because last time I checked, exclusive games go hand in hand with the success in selling hardware. You look at how many units the PlayStation 4 has sold, not just the PlayStation 4, but every single PlayStation console throughout every single generation. And you know for a fact that exclusive games have played a massive role in that, especially when you look at Nintendo as well. Okay, and even past Xbox consoles. To sit here and downplay exclusives because, oh, this game only sold 10 million units and there's like 100 million PS4s out there, or 110 million PS4s. If you think that's not successful, then you clearly have no understanding of what's actually considered a success, or even a huge success in the gaming industry. Let me tell you, a lot of publishers would love to be able to sell 1 million units of a certain game. That's usually a success. 2 to 3 million units is an even bigger success. 5 million units is extremely successful, but to go beyond that, 8, 9, 10, or even beyond that to 12, 13, 14 million units, that's a massive, colossal success. And look, I've always talked about the trickle effect. I'm not going to bother going into it again because I've talked about it too many times in the past, but these things go hand in hand, whether anybody wants to accept that or not. Just because Microsoft decided that it's not their future in gaming, just because Microsoft decided that, the priority is no longer selling their box and how many units they can sell, and it's no longer about how many copies of a game they can sell, it's now about how many subscriptions can we get, how many subscribers can we get on our new service. Listen, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not trying to say that Microsoft can't find success in that way or carve out their own little thing, but I'm just trying to ultimately say here that just because Microsoft decided they're going in a different direction and they're going to decide to determine what their own metric of success is or is not, doesn't mean that it's going to have this cascading effect on the wider gaming market like a lot of these hardcore Xbox fanboys will try to get you to believe, right? It doesn't really work that way. If that is in fact what's going to happen, we're going to find out. But something tells me it's just not going to work out that way. When you look at the excitement surrounding both PlayStation and even Nintendo's exclusive games, and you see how much hardware they're actually selling, you immediately realize that this is the way it's always been. There's a reason why it has stayed this way, and there's, most importantly, a reason why it works. There's a reason why the market responds the way they do to it. At the end of the day, the market speaks. And so for all of these Xbox guys who want to walk around saying that exclusives are anti-consumer and exclusives are not the future and whatnot, well, we're going to find out, because I understand that I could be wrong, but I'm just looking at the way the market has spoken for the past, I don't know how many years, how they're continuing to speak. And again, this doesn't mean that Microsoft can't find their own success. It's not so much about that, because I'm sure they'll do just fine, right? Like, they can do their own thing with Game Pass and whatnot and live service games and all that stuff. That's fine. Like, they don't have to have exclusive games. But to sit here and try to make it seem as though Sony is doing it the wrong way, or Sony's stuck in the past, or Sony, they're stuck in the mud or whatever, and the fans who like that way of them doing it, that there's something wrong with us as well. I'm not about that. And I'm not just going to sit here and basically say, oh yeah, you guys are totally right. Let's just believe everything Phil Spencer says. And let's just believe that this new plan he has in the future of gaming, well, if he says it's the future of gaming, then it must be the future of gaming. Not going to happen. I'm not going to do that. Okay. Like Phil Spencer has said a lot of things. The amount of times Phil Spencer told me that their next E3 was going to be their biggest and best, and it just frankly wasn't at all. In fact, I'd argue maybe it was one of their worst. Yeah, it's just I'm not going to do that. So I'm not going to keep going on about exclusive games, but I had to rant a little bit about this because I'm seeing this like come out, right? Like Phil Spencer made it very clear that he's not a believer in generational exclusive games. Xbox is not necessarily a believer in exclusive games at all, maybe exclusive games to their platform. But other than that, I mean, not so much, and that's fine. But I see the conversation that's starting here, surrounding other people and what they're saying about it and how they're trying to make it seem as though there's just something wrong. Look, anybody who has bought a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 4 Pro and bought some of their exclusive games and played them, I don't think a single person would tell you, yeah, it wasn't worth it. No, I think they'll tell you the exact opposite, that yeah, it was definitely worth it, and they'd probably do it again because that's how good these games are. Okay, and Sony knows that, and Sony wants to sell you hardware, so can't blame them for saying, hey, you want this you want this game, buy the hardware. So yeah, I'm all for PlayStation 5 exclusives. I don't think they're anti-consumer at all. If anything, I think they're pro-consumer, and I don't think there's anything wrong at all with sticking to what works, okay? Now, moving on from that, we need to talk about the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X and frame rates versus visual fidelity, because I've seen this conversation crop up now that, look, I'm not going to definitively tell you something because I don't know, but I'm going to make the best educated assumption that I can. Basically, what I'm talking about here is there are some Xbox fans who are at least insinuating, at the very least insinuating or implying, but in my opinion, they've made it pretty clear that this is what we can expect, that Sony's exclusive games are going to be 4K, but at 30 frames per second. And not many of their games at all are going to be at 60 frames per second. And because of that, they're just not going to look or be next gen, right? They're not going to be next gen. They're going to be 4K locked at 30. Meanwhile, the Xbox Series X is going to offer all of their first-party games with the standard of it being at 60 frames per second, but all of their games will look just as good as what Sony's games are offering, or maybe even better. And I have to call this out because to me, no, I don't believe that at all. Okay, Digital Foundry recently explained in a video talking about Spider-Man Miles Morales why developers are most likely, not all developers, but on a developer by developer basis, depending on their game, they're most likely going to opt for 30 frames per second as the standard for a lot of their games, especially if they're single player and story driven, right? And I don't think that's that surprising to anybody, although it might be, because that's been part of the conversation is, oh, these next gen consoles can easily do 60 frames per second. Digital Foundry was basically saying, look, Insomniac could most likely get Spider-Man Miles Morales running at native 4K, potentially 60 frames per second, but in order to do that, pretty much all of the overhead that is offered with the PlayStation 5 will be used to get that frame rate up to 60. And a lot of developers are going to not do that because instead they want to use that overhead for other things, such as ray tracing or just overall visual fidelity, lighting effects, and all this stuff. And a lot of other stuff that I'm just not really talking about right now because it doesn't really matter. You're going to see it for yourself, right? This is why these games are going to look so visually good. And I know what people are going to say. They're going to be like, oh, so you're telling me that Sony Studios are going to choose visual fidelity over frame rate? To which I'm going to tell you, yes. Yes, they are, as will most other studios, because that's just the way it's always been and always will be. 60 FPS has never been, and most likely, at least not for the foreseeable future, be the standard. It's just not. Now, this brings us to Xbox. Now, is it true that for Xbox and their first-party studios, 60 FPS is the standard? There's a mandate that every single first-party game needs to be 60 FPS. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think we're going to know until we see the games revealed and announced. But a lot of these Xbox guys would have you believe that it seems like that's what's going to happen. You're going to be surprised at how many games are running at 60 FPS or 120 FPS, which I don't doubt. I do believe that part. But the part I don't believe is you're going to then tell me that these Xbox studios, right, they're going to be able, with the extra power that the Xbox Series X is going to offer, they're going to be able to boost those games that look as good as the games we're seeing on the PS5 exclusively up to 60 FPS. But you're telling me that Sony and their studios wouldn't be able to do that with their games? They have to lock them at 30 FPS because that's just how weak the PS5 is? I don't believe that at all. In fact, that doesn't make much sense to me at all. The amount of overhead that would be required to make something like that happen, especially when you're talking about highly optimized games from these studios, you would need a lot of overhead. I mean, a lot. I mean, you would almost probably need double the amount of power to make that happen. So something's going to have to give here, okay? And I don't believe for a second that Microsoft and their studios would be able to create games that look as good visually, maybe artistically, but visually speaking, as good as the games we're going to see on PS5 that are locked at 30 FPS while still maintaining a 60 FPS. Look, I'll believe it when I see it, okay? But I'm talking about this because I've seen this kind of floating around where there's all these people who are insinuating that this is what we can expect, that when we see Microsoft's games revealed on the 23rd, they're not only going to look as good as the games we saw revealed at the PS5 event, like Horizon Forbidden West, right, and Ratchet and Clank, but they're also going to run at 60 FPS. I don't believe that for a second, okay? I would be shocked. Now, if you want to tell me that every studio has a mandate to maybe implement a performance mode to be able to play these games at 60 FPS, but obviously there's going to have to be some compromises visually, then I would believe that. But don't sit here and try to tell me that when you're talking about Sony studios like Insomniac Games and others, Guerrilla Games, they're going to be optimizing these games, to the nth degree here, and implementing every little visual bell and whistle they can and using every ounce of overhead that they can. And maybe that's why they're choosing to go for 30 frames per second. Don't try to tell me that you're then going to see that same type of visual quality, but at 60 FPS on the Series X. No, that's not how this works. Last time I checked, that's not how this ever has worked before. So yeah, not really sure what this narrative is that's going around. Again, I'll believe it when I see it. And if I do see it, then I will eat my words and I'll eat that crow and I'll say, listen, I guess I was wrong. Look at this Xbox game that looks literally just as good as Horizon Forbidden West, but it runs at 60 FPS. While we still don't even know what the frame rate for a game like Horizon Forbidden West is going to be. Could it be 60? Yeah, it might be. We don't know. Is it going to have a performance mode? We don't know. The whole thing I'm just trying to get at here is that this is once again, a lot of these Xbox guys trying to convince PlayStation fans and maybe other people as well who are trying to decide which console to get, that this power difference is going to be massive. Like, it's going to be the difference between 30 and 60 FPS games, but they're going to look just as good visually. And it's just like, that's not what's going to happen. I wouldn't anticipate that. And I think it's being completely disingenuous to try to convince people that that's what they can expect, because no. So yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for the video, guys. As I said, it was going to be a little bit ranty. It was pretty much just me ranting the entire time, but these are just things that I wanted to take some time to talk about, and I figured I'd see how you guys respond to it. So at this point, I'm going to ask you to leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know what you think about everything we discussed here today and my rant. Be sure to leave the video a like if you did enjoy it or you appreciate the content. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and haven't already. Hit the bell notification icon so you never miss an upload, and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.